Hi, I'm Michelle Stirling for Friends of Science Society. One of the things that people often wonder is, why does everyone go along with the climate catastrophe theory? Well, we talked with Ezra Levant just before our climate catastrophe leadership event in Calgary, and he had this to say.
And then you have people who simply go along to get along, whether you're an academic who wants to get tenure or wants to get a government grant. I have worked inside national newspapers. I was on the editorial board of the National Post for 2 years. To be an editorial writer in Canada, to go against the consensus on global warming, is to instantly become a pariah, to be mocked by your peers. So, most people are not conflict-oriented. So there's a lot of reasons why people would get on the global warming bandwagon. Personal profit, celebrity status, being fashionable, going along with the consensus. There's a lot of reasons in addition to those people who actually do believe in it.
So get along, go along, just agree with the climate catastrophe theory, because otherwise you'll be drummed out. It takes courage to stand up and say something, and that's why we respect Ezra Levant.
Politicians, activists, radicals, many of whom have nothing to do with each other normally, but the Venn diagram overlaps in one thing. They all benefit in some way by a radical environmentalist agenda. And here's an example. This is just one example. Believe me, I could show you a dozen. This is the Hewlett Foundation, from the computer innovator of that same name. And this shocking document shows a $100 million one-year grant. This is a 5-year, $500 million grant. Imagine that. Imagine one single foundation in one single year. And there are, I could name other foundations, but this is just so amazing to see it on their own website. $100 million for anti-carbon propaganda. They call it ClimateWorks, anti-carbon lobbying, anti-carbon journalism, anti-carbon organizing. So you can talk like the Unabomber, but live like David Suzuki, because the money closes the gap there. It's easy to believe in something that makes you rich. If you're a professor at the university, you'll get tenure and a grant. If you say this, if you say that, you won't. If you're a journalist, you'll be labeled an eccentric, contrarian, conspiracy theorist kook if you're a skeptic, or you can join the consensus, and journalists are nothing if not a mob. At the same time, you have people who want to de-industrialize the world and go back to living caveman style like the Unabomber, making common cause with billion-dollar industrialists. What's that overlap? Well, they both like subsidies for wind turbines, for example. So, and how do politicians fit in? Well, an excuse to tax and regulate and spread their domain. So it's a bizarre thing to follow. Everything used to be for the children. Don't you care about the children? Well, this is for the children with the added benefit of the earth. Don't you care about Mother Earth? Why do you hate the environment? And it's taken on the passion of a belief system, of a religion. It's more like a superstition. We saw that recently with the fire in Fort McMurray. We saw a lot of these activists talk about karma, or they were anthropomorphizing the fire as if it was an angry Mother Earth smashing immoral people. And that's not science. That's not evidence-based policy. That is a faith, a post-Christian, pagan, Gaian eco-superstition. So I see this tweet by Tom Moffat, the former Alberta NDP candidate down in Lethbridge. He sees the forest fire where you and I see tragedy, where we see danger. He sees a moment to gloat in glee. He says, karmic climate change fire burns Canadian oil sands city. Feel the burn. Can you imagine writing that? You're an Albertan. Feel the burn. I love how he invokes karma, which is, about Zen and but he is gloating in glee for danger. Thank God no one died in the evacuation, at least in those early days. He was rejoicing in the suffering. It's really a religious fervor. There's a quasi-religiousness. That's sort of a mishmash of Eastern religions, and but it's more superstition than religion. It's post-religious. It's really, though, an anthropomorphism. Oh, this was a moral punishment by Gaia of people in Fort McMurray. It's sort of like a burn the witch. And so that grips people. And you have a bit of all of these things. And then you have people who simply go along to get along.
Many people say that climate change is a moral issue.
Let me say one thing about the people who say they believe in global warming. I have yet to see someone who says he believes in global warming act like it. And when you think of how absurd that is, that someone who's campaigning against fossil fuels would drive a car, fly in a jet, it makes no sense. It would be like a vegetarian activist talking to you while chomping on a big drumstick. It's just the cognitive dissonance. We would laugh at least a vegetarian who's trying to convince you not to eat meat is a vegetarian themselves. But I have yet to meet a David Suzuki and Al Gore, an Avi Lewis and Naomi Klein, George Monbiot, who does not jet set, does not fly first class, does not have enormous homes. I mean, Al Gore's homes are famous for their size. There's that gorgeous shot of him with 4 computer screens and a TV on. I mean, there's not a lot of true believers, but there's a lot of self-deception and people saying, well, I excuse myself, my own conduct, because I'm doing this for the greater good. Look, there is no dividing line in Canada anymore between those radical activists like the Dogwood Initiative and the political leaders. Here's a story from back when Rachel Notley was the leader of the opposition. She had Greenpeace activists in her staff go and do hooliganism at conservative oil fundraisers. You know, there's just there's no line dividing where the eco-activists end and where she begins. Some of you have seen this video. I've played about 3 of these vids for you before if you were at our town hall in the summer. Forgive me for playing them again. Here's Rachel Notley when she was in opposition. Listen to how she talks about some ducks.
I mean, what this tragedy represents is a great deal of pain and suffering to the ducks, but also it represents the inherent conflict that exists between unbridled industrial growth that is conflicted with environmental protection, health protection, and community protection.
So they're doing this for the greater good. The IPCC has John Broome, who's a philosopher from Britain, who's helping them struggle with this moral equation on climate change. And here's what he had to say. These are amazing things. During the 3 years that I've worked for the IPCC, I've had many experiences that are not typical in the life of a philosopher. There's the travel, for one thing. Get this. To fight climate change, the IPCC finds it necessary to hold meetings in remote corners of the world. That's amazing. That's how they're fighting climate change, by flying everywhere. Here are the places he's been to. I've been to IPCC meetings in Lima, Changwon in South Korea, Wellington and Addis Ababa. In Europe, the IPCC has taken me to Vigo, Geneva, Oslo, Utrecht, Berlin, and Potsdam. Kuala Lumpur and Copenhagen are still to come. Why? What a well-traveled man. I hope the other authors offset the emissions caused by their travel to these meetings. I'm pleased to say that the British government plans to offset mine. That's what John Broome had to say about his travels for the IPCC. And as we know recently, the Minister, Catherine McKenna, noted that she buys offsets, and so does Elizabeth May. So that's the moral issue on climate change. Buy offsets and travel a lot.
All right, flash forward to where we are now. Here's Al Gore. With actual attorneys general, when I first saw this story, I thought, who would hang out with this OPEC half-billionaire? Like I say, he sold his TV channel, Current TV, to Al Jazeera to become Al Jazeera America. The sticker price was $400 or $500 million. OPEC oil money. I thought, who would hang out with this discredited oil hack? I thought these are retired attorneys. No, these are actual attorneys general who have announced that they are going to use Lawfare to make malicious lawsuits against anyone who has a skeptical view to their official political position on global warming. And to criminalize skepticism, now every one of those lawsuits will fail. Unlike us, they have a strong First Amendment down there. But that's not the point. The process is the punishment, the demonization, of course. But taking time and money and hassle and stress and management time and scaring away the faint-hearted and scaring away that's the plan. They know they won't convict anyone. It's still America and they still have free speech. But they will use taxpayers' money to burn up conservative think tank money. They'll do that all day.
I asked him about the Eco-Justice call for inquiry against Friends of Science that they have launched with the Competition Bureau of Canada. I said to him, as you know, Eco-Justice filed a complaint against us, which, no surprise, included a number of the people involved in the LEAP manifesto. So you can't even have a contrary opinion these days because they want to drag you off to jail. Could you comment on that? And here's what he said.
I'm familiar with the eco-justice nuisance suits. Not just with the Advertising Standards Council, but also with the Competition Bureau. They're junk lawsuits designed to demoralize, dispirit, waste time, waste money. There is a minuscule chance that they would succeed, this eco-justice suit. Likely not, but it's just about demonizing, and it's lawfare. It's using a lawsuit as a weapon.
So using lawfare as a weapon to silence people, is that really a fair and equitable part of a democratic discussion?
When you are silencing critics, that indicates the brittleness of your ideas. And again, it goes to, for example, your go along to get along. If you ask the average person, let alone the average journalist, about global warming, they'll just say, oh, 97% of scientists agree. And that's the level of their depth. If you say, well, agree on what, and what's your source, and all of a sudden that one-liner, that cliche, paper thin, that's gotten them through a dozen cocktail parties and 100 editorials is challenged, they panic because they actually haven't done their homework. And so it's a lot easier to say, shut up. Like the old joke, shut up, he explained.
These junk lawsuits are popping up all over the United States. And in fact, I was personally threatened after a debate that someone's going to put my name on the list of climate criminals to be prosecuted in the International Criminal Court of Justice. How far have we gone off the rails?
What's so curious to me is that eco-justice, for example, never sues the Saudis, never sues the Russians. Those are two of the largest oil producers in the world. Never goes after Iran, Nigeria, Venezuela, Qatar, Bahrain, Oman, Kuwait, UAE. It just never touches that. Never touches tankers off the East Coast. Never touches, it only goes after Canadian oil and gas. That's strange. I mean, I have no doubt that some of the people who work for eco-justice are true believers. Well, not so much so that they wouldn't use oil and gas and fossil fuels. Here's an example from an access to information request to the UK Foreign Office. The government of our friend and ally, the United Kingdom, was paying the Pembina Institute to come up with anti-oil sands actions. So a foreign country, by the way, that imports, the North Sea oil is declining. They invest, let me put it that way, they invest in every despotic regime in the world. So the UK has no problem investing in every OPEC dictatorship, but they will spend money in Canada to have sock puppets attacking the oil sands because it would look more natural and organic than if some fellow from the High Commission would say, I do say, those oils, you know what, I mean, we would say, you're our ally, why are you attacking us? So it was only through access to information. So this is just open governments that will answer a question if you put it to them. Here's the Form 990, it's too small to look at. I'll just tell you, it's the disclosure of the Tides Foundation in San Francisco, $153 million a year. spent on anti-oil sands and other left-wing causes. The Canadian branch plant of Tide spends about $25 million. These are the ones we know about because they're under disclosure requirements by the IRS, etc.
So what we need to do as Canadians is we need to speak up. We need to object to these foreign-funded lobbyists who are interfering in our economy and interfering in our environmental policies. And they're obviously picking on us. It's obviously some kind of trade war because they're not doing this anywhere else in the world. So you need to have the courage to stand up and say no. Say no to climate CO2 coercion. I asked him about the financial costs of Alberta's plan to phase out coal. It's going to cost about $22 billion, $11 billion to build natural gas replacement capacity, and another more than $11 billion to compensate the present coal industry. And he had some very surprising comments that people don't really care in government whether or not there will be energy poverty. In fact, that's their mandate. Let's hear what he had to say.
When Rachel Notley, when Shannon Phillips, when Brian Topp and the other leaders of the Alberta NDP talk about getting off of fossil fuels, they mean it. And so the whole idea of the green shift, which is the whole idea of the carbon tax, is to make power so expensive that people use less of it. The whole idea behind a sin tax is to dissuade people from using that source. So energy poverty is not an unfortunate outcome. It is the deliberate outcome. So when you talk about a $22 billion extra charge, to you and I, that's crazy, that's a disadvantage, that's a reason not to do it. But if you believe that energy is evil, especially fossil fuel energy, if you believe in the ideology of reduce, reuse, recycle, well, what better way to make you reduce your life, reuse things, recycle, have a smaller life, travel less, be colder in the winter, hotter in the summer, have a smaller home, have a smaller car. The way to get you to do that, you would never choose to do that, but if it is so expensive to have power, to have energy, you'll do that. That's what the carbon tax, that's the whole ideology behind the green shift.
So in the context of Ontario, we have recently heard that Ontario is going completely to electricity, which is going to boost power prices way higher. And Ezra pointed out that the cost to phase out coal in Alberta, only $22 billion, is nothing by comparison to what's happening in Ontario.
I live in exile in Ontario now, and I can tell you that the green energy schemes of that province have given it the highest electricity prices in North America. And when you estimate a $22 billion fee for getting off coal, that is not unreasonable if Ontario is the model. And everything's going to get more expensive. Life will become harder, and it'll, it obviously will never be, God forbid, like Venezuela. But look at Venezuela these days. Energy shortages in a country that has the world's largest energy reserves, even more than Saudi Arabia. How could that happen? Well, because of policy. When you demonize industry and capitalism and freedom, even in the midst of plenty, you can have shortage. And in Alberta, which is lucky enough to have coal and oil and gas, you will have energy poverty in Alberta because of the NDP, and ironically it'll hurt the lower economic strata the most, because of course if you're a millionaire, okay, so you pay an extra $5,000 a year for energy. If you're very poor, maybe you're paying an extra $1,000 a year in energy, but it's still hurting you, and don't tell me you're going to get a subsidy, because the price of everything's going to go up.
So in fact, these political parties that claim to believe in social justice and who want to help the poor and elevate the working man are actually putting in policies that will decimate the poor and destroy the working man and his or her job.
I'm delighted to have 450 people show up to hear me give a talk. I'm thrilled. Thanks and congratulations to the Friends of Science. I think I would give one piece of advice, and that is, although the global warming theory, the theory of man-made global warming is dominant, there are a large number of people who are skeptical of it. There's different layers of skepticism. You could be skeptical that the globe is warming. You could be skeptical that it's caused by man. You could be skeptical that we could do anything about it. You could be skeptical that we should do anything about it, and you could be skeptical how to do something about it. You could be skeptical that the people who are promoting a solution actually believe it. I mean, does anyone look at Al Gore and say, there's a guy who's really reduced his carbon footprint? So my point is, you don't have to feel alone. A lot of people will give the fashionable cocktail party answer, oh yeah, I believe in global warming. But when they know it's okay to speak candidly, if you lead, I think you'll find a lot of people who say, yeah, I'm a bit skeptical too. That's the thing about a perpetual revolution, a perpetual calamity, the sky's going to fall. That's the thing about saying we only have 6 months to clean up the climate. We only have 6 years. These people have been in this business for so long, each one of their deadlines has come and gone. So I guess I would prescribe courage and say that speaking out and speaking back and not turtling, but rather fighting back, that's my advice, is these guys are just paid professional lobbyists, and they're very effective, very powerful. But I believe that grassroots real Canadians could be more powerful because there's more of us and we're actually Canadian, unlike these foreign-funded saboteurs.
So you need to have the courage to stand up and say no. Say no to climate CO2 coercion. For Friends of Science, I'm Michelle Stirling.